My name is Johnson Kang with Cloudian, and I'll be your host for the webinar today. Joining me today are Jim Moulton, responsible for Hyland's business development, and also Grant Jacobson, Cloudian's Director of Technology Alliances. And with that, I'll let Grant take it away. Grant?
Hey, thanks, Johnson. Thanks to everyone who's joining. We are going to provide a webinar talking about how to simplify healthcare data storage while also ensuring access, security, and compliance. We're just going to cover some of the key challenges facing organizations today in healthcare. We're going to present a joint solution that addresses each of those challenges and go into a deeper dive in some of the solution elements, finishing off with a summary, and then finally taking questions. So with that, let me introduce Jim Moulton to kick it off. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Grant. I appreciate the introduction. So the first part of this webinar, I'm going to talk a little bit about what a lot of you are probably already familiar with, the explosion in healthcare data, the unprecedented demand for that, and how are we going to access that and get that to the right people. So, been in this industry prior to joining Hyland. I've been at Hyland for 5 years, managing a lot of their partnerships and alliances. Prior to that, I was in a data storage software company, dealing a lot in healthcare as well. And back in the 90s, if we had a customer that had a dozen or so terabytes, that was a lot of information that would be strictly in typically a radiology PACS or a separate cardiology PACS. And that was pretty much it for PACS, where we really concentrate our storage efforts was radiology and cardiology. But the explosion really started happening. You started seeing other ologies pop up: urology, dermatology, ophthalmology, gastroenterology. These weren't popping up, but they started using videos and pictures more and more. And a combination of that and the continued use of the modalities that use DICOM data created this explosion of data. And today we came out with a VNA, and we'll get into exactly what a vendor neutral archive is. But the Hyland VNA is able to store all of that information in a single location because you're getting these explosion of data. And so, IDC says that a few years ago it was 153 exabytes was new data generated, whereas in 2020 that's going to be 2,314, which is a little over 2 zettabytes, 45% annual growth. So no doubt everybody's aware of this, but there's been a massive explosion of data in healthcare. So you have all this information, which we're all aware of, and now we need to access that information. So we have this unprecedented demand for information. We're all pretty aware of the fact that your doctor needs to access the information. But it's more than just your doctor. So you have a primary care, you have a specialist, you have possibly an emergency, and all the administrative staff around the doctors. A perfect example was, we had my daughter. She hurt her back in gymnastics. Took her into the emergency room, had some pictures taken, found out she had a little bit of a curvature of the spine, which wasn't an emergency situation anymore. Sent that back to our primary care physician, who then told us we should go see a specialist in Boston about it. Everybody's looking at the images, and some of them had access to the images and some of them didn't. We'd have to bring a CD or a DVD around. And then once you see the specialist gives their opinion, and then we say, all right, well, we want a second opinion on that. So, and then we have to have another look at it. So what's nice is to be able to have a place where you can get all of your information, one location, accessible through the EMR, EHR, and have all that information available to any doc that wants to look at it. You also have a secondary need for all that information. So you have artificial intelligence, big data, research, and education. This is not particularly on this slide, but they also need to take a look at that as well, which is extremely important to continued providing good health care to the patients. Okay, the problem, what we have today though, so we know that we have this explosion of data. We know that we have a bunch of people that are trying to access that information and share that information to provide the best health care possible. The problem is it's still being siloed off. So every application stores to a particular storage type. So you have endoscopy, they're storing to a location. Ophthalmology, they're storing to a location. Dermatology, they're storing to a location. So you literally have dozens, if not hundreds, of applications at some of the larger institutions that are storing directly to storage, and this can't be shared. The storage is having a hard time sharing back and forth with each other. The applications can't share back and forth with each other. So you have vendor lock-in and vendor block-in. In all the ologies, AGFA can't share, even in radiology, AGFA can't share with McKesson. McKesson can't share with AGFA. Take that outside of urology, ophthalmology can't share with a radiology. So it's very difficult to share information at this point in time, and that is one of the reasons why people are asking for Hyland to help them store and find this information using a VNA. The challenges to do this, though, is that so you have all this information that's been siloed off. You have unstructured content in a lot of different locations. You know, some people call this the rogue data or black hole data. And you have this unstructured content in digital and paper formats, standalone servers, physical file cabinets, desk drawers. Hyland can help you get in that. We have services team that can go out and scan these documents, make sure that they get into the Hyland database, and then make it accessible. We also have missing and lack of access to the health content. So, you know, this is also confusing too. You open up your EMR, you look for a record, and you can find certain radiology files, but you can't find the cardiology file, or you can't find, you know, one of these point of care stations where someone took a camera and stuck it down your throat and took a picture, and that is not in the EMR. So one of the things is we're looking to collect all of that information, put it in a central location, and help complete the patient record. We still have to, not only do we have to do that, but we have to make sure that it's secure, compliant, and private.
Thanks, Jim. And that's a very good summary of the just some of the challenges facing organizations today with their healthcare data. And storage is an important piece of that, and it's really the complementary part of this solution with the vendor neutral archive, the VNA that Jim has been talking about, that actually captures and consolidates that. And so really it's, as I say, starting with the VNA that does that consolidation across those packs, across the different silos, for the images, for all the new kind of data, even the archive data, to actually assemble a comprehensive patient record quickly and easily. But where's all the data live? That's important too. That's a key to ensuring that security, the compliance, and the privacy. And that's where the Cloudian HyperStore object storage comes in as a platform for that healthcare data. Briefly, HyperStore is a highly durable, S3 compatible, limitlessly scalable enterprise storage. We are the secure repository for many companies storing that data, providing a shared pool and access that Jim was talking about to that data in a controlled way based on policies, and that is for a single location or actually across multiple locations. A quick picture of what that looks like altogether. On the right side of this slide here, we show the Hyland Acuo VNA that does that consolidation, one system to capture and manage all of that information. There's huge productivity benefits here. There's a lot of efficiencies that you get with that, and that links directly on the bottom of that picture to that Cloudian object store, which is an on-premise in the data center or in the hospital, but also, as I'll talk later, has options to tier to a public cloud if that's of interest, for example, for disaster recovery. So this solution combined really is a standards-based. You streamline all the workflows and the processes that are in place. It actually improves and accelerates those workflows to provide even real-time access to that information. The data is very well protected. As I mentioned, there are security policies, compliant policies. In the United States, for example, you have HIPAA as a compliant requirement. That's all enabled here. Jim mentioned it briefly, but I'll point out the metadata search and analytics. So it's not just the data and the medical image, but actually running analytics on all of this information to produce analysis and diagnosis and other insight from that data is what you get here. So again, as a summary of that solution, addressing each of those challenges, where we have an opportunity to consolidate that healthcare data. This is secure, as I mentioned, real-time delivery and access to that patient record that's much more complete now. We're increasing the speed, the productivity associated with clinical diagnostic processes. And of course, all of this is in the service of improving patient outcomes. So let's look closely, a little more closely at the Hyland Acuo VNA, and that's back to you, Jim.
Thank you, Grant. So we're going to get a little bit more technical. We're not going to get too far into the weeds, but a little bit more technical on exactly what is the Hyland VNA. So a vendor-neutral archive is a general-purpose digital asset management service that allows you to store, track, retrieve virtually any type of digital asset routed to it, and share it with a proprietary siloed existing solution for the betterment of the patient. So what that means basically is the vendor-neutral part. Let me define that a little bit. It means that you can use any application and still be able to access the data. So if you're using AGFA as your PACS and you have a vendor-neutral archive in, you'll be able to use your McKesson PACS. You have two different PACS going on. Potentially there was a merger at the hospital. There was two PACS for whatever reason. Currently, they really don't do a very good job of sharing data or seeing the information that they have stored with one or the other. A vendor-neutral means if it's stored in the archive, that McKesson will be able to see what has been stored in AGFA, and AGFA will be able to see McKesson, et cetera. And use any example, any other companies, and that'll fit there. Not only that, but also on the back end, the storage as well. So we'll be able to move pretty easily from, if you want to change your vendor there, you can move from EMC to Cloudian. You can move from NetApp to Cloudian very easily as well, or any two vendors. So it allows you to get out of that vendor lock-in situation that you might be stuck in today. Moving on to the next slide, there we go. So what is stored, what are those key digital healthcare assets that we talked about? It's usually separated into two different buckets. One is the DICOM data, and the other is the non-DICOM XDS. And let me explain what DICOM is. DICOM is a digital imaging and communication in medicine. It's a standard for interoperability. It's used in any of the not old modalities, but the modality machines where you go in and have an X-ray or picture or an MRI type of machine. And it's a little bit of an older format. It was created, I think, in the late 80s, early 90s. And it's a format and transfer protocol for medical imaging. Like I said, you see it in X-ray, mammography, CT, and many more. And then the other bucket we have a lot of information is the non-DICOM XDS. This is the cross-enterprise document sharing. This is also a standard interoperability, which allows storage in native format of PDFs, images, videos, and basically, I mean, non-DICOM is anything else. Any other type of file type that you can think of, we'll be able to store it and catalog it and make sure that it's easy to find. It'll be located in the VNA. It's all of your other content, which Hyland has a long history. It goes back 25 years. This is where you got our start, storing all of your content management. And in the last few years, with the purchase of Acuo, we have added the vendor-neutral archive as well. But let me talk about breaking those silos that we talked about earlier. So right now, you have radiology PACS that are storing to a specific location. You have cardiology PACS that are storing to a specific location. We can bring that all into one. So we have one true source across all the departments. That is, this box at the end is the Acuo VNA, the Hyland Acuo VNA combined with Cloudian is the central location where everything is stored. And then, we have the database that we know where to find where everything's located as well, but it doesn't all have to be stored in Cloudian. You may have a tiered storage infrastructure behind there with Cloudian handling the bulk of the archive, for example. But Acuo will be able to find everything up and offer one integration point to your EMR. So this is huge as well. So now your EMR doesn't have to do dozens and dozens of different integrations to each individual application that might be storing part of your health record. We'll have one integration point going to your EMR, Epic, Meditech, Cerner, Allscripts, etc. Hyland has worked with these guys in the past. We're technology partners with all of them. We have hundreds and thousands of installations with each of them. So it makes it very easy for you to have one location to find all of your information tucked neatly inside your EMR. Got a little delay on my page now, but here we go. So how can Acuo VNA help in healthcare? The number one thing that does, that technically, just talked about technically what we can do for you. What that does, it allows easy access to these clinical images. So you can easily store and retrieve images regardless of the packs that it's in. We have policies that allow you to prefetch for relevant prior studies, which will make getting your information much faster, much more intelligent, automated process. Like I just mentioned, we image enable the EMR EHR so that once you're in there, you don't even know that you've left your EMR EHR. It looks like you're getting all this information right from within Epic, and you click on a link and you have all your information that's, that has been collected and managed and cataloged by Hyland. So this ends the whole siloed approach. Okay, so you may have some various caches at the applications for really high-speed data, read-write information going back and forth. But anything, maybe 2-3 months old, we automatically going to move off to an archive potentially managed by Cloudian, which, for all intents and purposes, ends the silo. Everybody has access to the information, whether it's your doctors or it's artificial intelligence, big data, etc. This allows referring physicians to get the entire patient structure, regardless of department, facility, or political issues. And it also allows the reading physician complete access to all the patient's records for a more informed diagnosis. So again, all the docs that need to have access to it will have access to it. And all the secondary people that need to have access to it will also have access to it. We also, to help continue to manage that information, we have some policies with our image lifecycle management. We can do demographic updates from EMR to archive in between data centers. We have flexible retention and purge policies, which, most of the time, depending on your state and the type of information it is, you could have a policy that says you have to keep this information for 7 years. You could have another policy or compliance that you need to keep information for 100 years over the life of the patient. You can easily set that up with inside the software to have various rules for different information types, various rules for where it's stored and how it's stored. And that allows you to most effectively and efficiently use all the storage that you have at your disposal. We have also the ability to create policies to meet your state's requirements or business needs, as I mentioned. Ability to retain only the studies you want and not keep all the outside imported studies. This part is pretty important as well. We've gone into a lot of institutions, and it's like an episode of that TV show Hoarding. So they just keep everything under the sun. And not only do they keep it, but they typically keep, 6, 7 copies we've seen, dozens of copies actually, and 3's a pretty good rule of thumb to keep them around, but we've seen people that just have multiple numbers of copies of the same information. And you may have heard of the technology data duplication. That works well in a lot of other verticals, but in healthcare, especially with images, data deduplication does not work well. It's basically unusable. So we do see a lot of information multiple times, and I think it's really important that your VNA is able to get rid of that information and identify what you do not want to keep so that you can delete information at the appropriate time. We also have the ability to segregate based on the DICOM tag that studies you want to keep or prefetch to another location. This is also a very important fact, is we eliminate the need. And you'll see when you talk about VNA, sometimes people bring this up as the number one thing. This eliminates the need for costly migrations. The migration to the VNA is often called the final migration, because once the information is in the VNA, you can then mix and match or purchase whatever you want on the front end for your retrieval engine, whether it be packs, you like Agfa packs, you like Sector packs, or McKesson, GE, whatever, Fuji, whoever it is, you can move to the latest versions of that. You can go for a different flavor for different docs, and it's not a big deal anymore because everything's accessible from the VNA and shareable within all the applications. So the image is already archived in the VNA, and any packs can access these images using the DICOM standard, which is basically what I just said. Any application will be able to read the other application's data when you have a VNA in place, and you'll never have to do a migration again. Saves a ton of money, time, and frustration. You own the data, and you can do what you want with it. You can use whatever front-end tool is the right way to look at your information. I'm going to turn it over at this point to Grant so we can get a little bit more technical on the Cloudian solution.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate that. Let's take a look at the underlying storage. So on this slide, just showing you the Cloudian appliance. The Cloudian is actually a software company, software-defined storage company, but the software runs, of course, in a appliance here that is on-prem. As I mentioned, this is fully S3 compatible. The nice thing about this is this actually starts quite small. So even 50 terabytes is not too small. Of course, we have mutual customers with Hyland actually running the solution today, and it's much bigger than 50 terabytes. This solution scales very well, very nicely to petabyte range, even exabyte range, very easily with the same architecture. As I mentioned earlier, this is really about setting up policies for compliance, for security. We are multi-cloud, hybrid cloud ready, and it's extremely cost effective. This is really a capacity tier, if you think about it, for this healthcare data at under a penny a gigabyte. So really it is about scalability. With that data growth that Jim mentioned at the outset, we need to have a way for organizations to have a solution that works not just for today, but on into the future, because there will be more video, more medical imaging, larger size files, and it's always great when you don't have to replace a system that is working today, but not for the future. So limitless scalability, it's also non-disruptive. So you can add capacity, add a node, no disruption, what we call zero downtime scaling. And that's also while supporting full data protection, which I'll get to in a minute here. So we have linear performance, we have common management across all of this data, all the location, and scale as you need to. So all of this appears as a single pool, no matter where it is. That storage pool looks to be a unified storage pool because we have a single global namespace. We have very fine-grained storage policies at a bucket object level. And with respect to data protection, built into the architecture, very flexible, what's known as erasure coding or replication data protection. And that's, as I say, very flexible because that can be done within a site or across sites, and also ensuring data consistency. So quick view of that data protection. We're talking about healthcare data, which cannot be lost. We use very commonly replication, which is the left side of the slide, showing you how we have those multiple copies at remote sites or even in a public cloud. The right side works the same way, except it's erasure coding is a little bit different because of how that data is striped or stored across those different nodes and across the different locations. So you can protect the data where it is, also protect to the cloud if that's an option, and it really works quite well and very cost efficient as well. Some of the other quick areas I'll just highlight for Cloudian and HyperStore. This is a single platform, a single architecture, not just for these objects, but also for file. I mentioned S3 also works for SMB NFS. There is an integrated search and data analytics capability that is with the enhanced metadata tagging. Jim had mentioned tagging, and that is where a lot of value can be extracted from this data. So that's completely integrated. I mentioned data protection. There's also flexible deployment. So that's very nice depending on an organization's requirements. So those are a few things I will just highlight. As a summary for Cloudian HyperStore, really it is a plug-and-play backup target, works very well. In fact, it's proven with the Hyland Acuo VNA. We have mutual customers running this today in production. Scalable storage, auto tiering to public cloud if that is a requirement, and of course, start small and scale as you need to. So this is primary storage. It can be secondary storage and work with other storage that you have. And there's a hybrid multi-cloud option where needed. So in summary, and Jim, feel free to chime in as well. This is the combined solution here with Hyland VNA connecting with the Cloudian storage. Jim?
Yeah, no, that's an outstanding summary. Thank you, Grant. So this, at the end of the day, I think this gives you the most efficient and effective access to all of your information, to any person who needs to access that information, doctors, yourself, secondary use cases. Acuo VNA tied in with some Cloudian storage gives you everything that you're going to need to do to access that information. Thank you.
Thank you very much again for attending our webinar today, and we look forward to seeing you guys at the next one.